afternoon, everybody. On the dais with me, Mr. Razdan, our very senior colleague, veteran, and must congratulate him for being very consistently dedicating himself to the cause for which we have gathered today, this afternoon. Mr. Balyan, esteemed members of the fraternity, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I must congratulate the organizers for this meet that is being held, the World Hydrogen Energy Summit. Also because, incidentally, this happens to be a time when the entire world is beset with certain geopolitical peculiarities, where even those who did not find much of the stake in this subject of clean energy or green energy have also found themselves constrained to talk about it, discuss about it, or at least to try to understand what it's all about. And therefore, it is not only appropriate that we are here, all the stakeholders under a single roof, but also because in the last 1 decade or so, more so in the last 5 or 7 years, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi's personal intervention, there has been a major thrust as far as India's endeavors to achieve the goals of clean energy, green hydrogen, so on and so forth. As you would recall, in one of the earliest meetings that he attended, the COP meeting soon after he took over as Prime Minister, it was India that made a commitment of net zero by 2070. And sure, it was a very ambitious commitment, a very bold commitment, and now the challenge is to live up to that. And thereafter, in this year's budget itself, the nuclear mission was launched, which envisages 100 gigawatt of nuclear energy by 2047. I shall come to that a little later after a few moments. And therefore, simultaneously, India is seeking to operate at different levels to move in that direction. On the one hand, there is the aim to increase our oil and gas sector investment to about $100 billion US. On the other hand, to expand the exploration area to 1 million square kilometer. And at the same time, our refining capacity already is among the leader nations in the world, but still we are endeavoring to improve it further. The liquefied natural gas goal is to contribute 15% of the total energy demand via LNG. So these are all ambitious goals, but that means the very fact that we are ready to lay before us these milestones is that we also have the confidence that we could achieve that. And the world has also started now believing in us that here it is now the time that India can actually do it. As far as the green hydrogen is concerned, as you would all be aware, it is this government which launched the green hydrogen mission, and India is now positioning itself as one of the leading nations as far as the transition to the green world or the green earth is concerned. And certainly, India with its vast population of 1.4 billion can play a crucial role rather in decarbonizing heavy industries like steel, cement, etc., not for the benefit of its own populace, but for the benefit of the entire mankind, because we almost constitute India and China together nearly half the population of the world. And therefore, now the challenge and the responsibility will be to how to acquire indigenous capacities, or as Prime Minister expresses it as Atmanirbharta or Atmanirbhar Bharat. So I think all of those who are in this business would understand that one of our issues is electrolyzer, which is not always indigenously available in the form that we wish to have. So we need to have indigenous electrolyzers, or we need to create some kind of an arrangement where we could be cost effective, because that's what is escalating the cost of the green hydrogen. And till the time we can actually achieve that capacity, We are actually in some of our labs, even associated with the CSIR, have already started experimenting on green hydrogen, one of our small conductors, because we have also placed before ourselves a goal of 5 small reactors by 2033. One of them will be, and we have already started working on 3 of them. One would be a small modular reactor, which is called Bharat Small Modular Reactor. The other would be Bharat Small Reactor, which is not modular, but the heavy water one, the conventional one. And third, of course, is the hydrogen, but it's going to be very small, just a few megawatts. So that means we have the capacity, we need to scale it up, for we need funds, we need resources, and I think with the government approach that you see currently, private players will be playing a very important role. So I'm glad, and I must compliment Mr. Rajna to have the industry leaders over here as well, because if we have to move on in that direction, it cannot be left to government alone. Similarly, our electric vehicle is gradually turning into a mass movement. You find young groups. Recently, we had this automobile exhibition over here at Bharat Mandapam, and I was fascinated. Small groups of boys and girls making a lucrative livelihood by just introducing batteries into the engines of the 3-wheelers that had expired their life, and making a good fortune out of that. So it's becoming not only an electric vehicle movement, it's also becoming an important avenue of employment or livelihood, which could also be sometimes fancifully described as green jobs, whether it's in the form of EV charging stations, or very soon I think we'll also have to scale up our integrated energy grids. And when we talk of the jobs, obviously this is going to be an essential or natural fallout with the solar manufacturing, battery recycling, grid management, EV industry, etc. Similarly, I'd like to share that in CSIR, we are also experimenting with the circular economy, also generating clean energy. For example, we have started using cooking oil to produce biofuels. We started this experiment from Dehradun. They were procuring the cooking oil from the municipal kitchens. On my request, and I'm glad they were gracious enough to entertain my request, we started procuring it from housewives. And initially, about 5-6 years back, started paying them for each kilogram of the used cooking oil, rupees 20. And the idea was that one day the housewives would wonder and ask the people around, who are these, naive ones who come and pay me for the oil which I had to waste down the drain of my kitchen. And now I learned only a few days back that the price of that 20 kg has gone up to 60 kg because both sides are making a good return out of that. Similarly, from Parali, we are now into producing biobutamin, which is in another way also a circular economy, as well as also serving the cause, a larger cause of clean energy. As far as renewable energy is concerned, I don't need to talk, because I'm sure many of the speakers before and after me would be talking about the solar energy. The wind energy has been talked about in this country for the last almost 20 years, though we have a solar alliance as well. That is the contribution of this government. But what is new is that in the Deep Ocean Mission, which was launched by this government and announced by the Prime Minister twice from the ramparts of the Red Fort during his Independence Day address, we are now also venturing into what is known as ocean energies, which could be through solar panels being put across the ocean surfaces, which could be from the winds running across the oceans, which could be generated from the energy generated when a river gushes into the ocean, that shore. So, which could also be the result of the tides which happen, the height of the tide, the pace of tide. So we are actually, and since we have a long coastal area and a huge ocean, only country with an ocean named after itself, the Indian Ocean, we have an advantage of experimenting with this, and we are now getting into this in a big way. I think in the times to come, we might also create some room for the private players to enter into these ventures. Very recently, we started from Lakshadweep. First, we started a water line water plant to produce drinking water, portable drinking water. So what was being done, that the water would be allowed to get to boil and get evaporated, and from the surface, the vapors that were produced would be converted into water, which would be potable water. So that was a huge, huge relief for that island territory, because it's just like water everywhere, not a drop to drink. So they were, and it was a tremendous cost carrying the potable water from the mainland. But now we have also, learning from that experience, raised it to a different level to generate energy. So which is called something like integrated conversion system. So we have a pipe of water from the ocean surface, that is the surface sea water, which is almost the same temperature as the temperature of the place. In case of Lakshadweep, of course, it will be any time of the day, year, not less than 35, 38 degrees centigrade. And then we have a pipe coming from about 8-10 meters below the surface of ocean, which is called deep sea water, where the temperature is never more than 8 degrees or so. So we allow both the pipes to come. They merge. They also produce vapors, as I was talking in the earlier experiment. At the same time, the energy generated serves as an electricity. So what I'm trying to say, that we have more than one sources from where we can actually supplement our pool of green energies or nuclear energies or clean energies, just that possibly we were not having the kind of resources. And as far as the nuclear energy is concerned, you would have all read in the newspapers, it's been in the news for the last 1 week, India has now entered into the second stage of our nuclear program, because Homi Bhabha has set up a three-stage, and now very recently we are into the second stage, where we have a prototype fast breeder reactor using plutonium. The yield is much higher than the input, and that places us in a very elite club of the world, because only Russia has that, and this is purely indigenous. Even China is still struggling to have one. So that brings us closer to the third stage, which will be thorium stage, which is a great advantage for us, because India has the largest store of thorium. Almost 25% of thorium in the world is over here. We have these beach sandy minerals, the rock minerals contain, one of them is monazite, of which the component is thorium. And only the last session we got the Shanti Act enacted. The Shanti Act, which in other words is the sustainable energy for sustainable harnessing and advancement of nuclear energy for transforming India. And one of the main features is that for the first time, the nuclear sector has been opened up to the private sector. Now, that has been quite an out-of-box decision, a very revolutionary decision. Most of the governments, particularly the political dispensations, are not in the habit of moving out of status quo, because they have to go back for the vote after 5 years. But this was a decision which is taken with a long vision. And we are now one of the very few countries, France and few other countries, who have private sector also engaged in the nuclear sector. And we have also done the capping of the various reactor capacities and linked the liability to it. For example, earlier we had just a single bracket of liability. Now, for example, you can have a 300 megawatt reactor, you can have a 750 megawatt. So if you plan a very small reactor, say just about 150 megawatt, your liability would be just about 300 crore, which of course doesn't happen, because the liability is just for the sake of having an assured security guarantee on both sides. But usually there's never been an instance of a mishap happening, at least in India. But nevertheless, that was one impediment, so that has also been capped. So as you move on now, for example, if you have a higher capacity reactor, say more than 3,000 or 4,000 megawatt, then possibly the liability amount earmarked would be about 3,000. So that would also enable the smaller groups, smaller players to be a party to it. And one thing which has been missed out even by the media persons is that when we have opened up the nuclear sector to the private players, we have also opened up the nuclear medicine research, because we have actually had registered a number of firsts as far as our nuclear medicine is concerned. Very recently, our Tata Memorial Center came out with the first ever nuclear medicine remedy for what is known as acute lymphoblastic leukemia, in the layman's language, the blood leukemia of the children, which is very fatal, it's a very bad prognostic course. But again, we had abundant human resource. What was lacking perhaps was the financial resource. And now, since we are trying to make it a part of a larger ecosystem, we have also started launched what is called the Anusandhan National Research Foundation, which is of course a better version of such research foundations in Germany, US, etc. And therefore, with a larger pool being planned or envisaged, I'm sure our journey is going to be faster than before, and the world today is also ready to acknowledge that and also looking up to us, which in other words means that we could be leaders or torchbearers of the green transition of the Mother Earth. Thank you very much.